And welcome to Whiskey Politics. Dave Sussman here. Thursdays at, we're doing it Thursdays at 4 now. And thanks for tuning in. And you can find us at America's Voice News. You can also find me doing America's Voice live on America's Voice News every weekday from 11 to 1 Pacific. That's 2 to 4 East Coast time. And we're busy with everything that's happening in the news right now. There's just so much to talk about. There's so many different subjects that we could be talking about. So we've got a packed show today for you. We're going to first start out with, in our first half, with Scott McKay. He's a writer over at the American Spectator and a publisher at The Hayride. And then in our second half, we're going to be bringing in John Sullivan. He is the producer and director of No Safe Spaces with Adam Carolla and Dennis Prager. That's where we're going to be talking about the suppression of free speech by the left and on campus as well as throughout our culture. But first, I want to discuss this week's election results. Before we get started, something should signify something that happened this week, which I think should really be of concern to anybody that is paying attention. First, a quick rundown. You've already seen the news. Kentucky, 5 out of the 6 races went very well for Republicans. Matt Bevin had to call for a recount as the margin was less than 0.5%. We do know that there was some shenanigans taking place in Fayette County. That's where Lexington is. They kept some polls open later than they should have been. And apparently there was a huge number of new votes this cycle that hadn't appeared before, like a massive percentage, especially on the Democrat side. So they need to investigate that and see what's happening. Now, good news in Kentucky is we saw Kentucky Attorney General-elect Daniel Cameron. He was elected, and the first black attorney general and first Republican in 70 years. Not only that, Cameron is the first black statewide elected official. Great news. It is huge news. And why haven't we heard about this? Well, because Daniel Cameron is a Republican, and Trump definitely wanted him to win. Yeah, he's 33 years young, so we can expect to see a lot of Daniel Cameron in the future, and I thought that was fantastic news. Meanwhile, Mississippi went with Tate Reeves, Republican. New Jersey saw some state legislature offices flip. They went red, and the big news, if you're watching the mainstream media this week, something that they were absolutely giddy about, is that Virginia went full deep blue. Now, a lot of people say that's due to the suburbs surrounding D.C. I would agree with that. But I say this, and I said this last night on the Real Side Radio show. I had 3 hours on Salem Radio and the GCN network. And I also talked about it briefly today at America's Voice Live. Democrats didn't win that election in Virginia last Tuesday. They won it 3 months ago. And the reason for that is because a liberal judge allowed for the gerrymandering Democrats who wanted Virginia basically sliced up by districts on race and, the identity that they are so focused on the left, and therefore spreading out what they believed was going to be their vote among more geography. This is now the game, folks. And if you think it was just Washington, D.C. bureaucrats who've moved out to the suburbs because the bureaucracy's become too big, they're making too much money, so they're now, they can't afford their own homes, they're spreading out into Virginia. That's partly true, but the bigger picture here is this, okay? This is really the key, is that if you can't win at the ballot box, you have to win in courts. This is what the Democrats are now essentially doing. If you can't win at the ballot box, you will win in the courts. And in Virginia, they did. They won an election by changing the districts, and the federal judge allowed it 3 years ago. And this week, we saw the results as the Democrats took the Assembly and the Senate. And with the liberal governor, Northam, they're now basically going to be turning Virginia into California, this primordial Marxist ooze coming out of New York down the coast, coming from California's left coast and moving eastward. This is what is happening. But Trump is doing incredible things on the courts. And I'm just going to say this, he has appointed more federal judges and Supreme Court justices of a conservative level than we have seen in decades. He's beaten out at this point right now. His percentage is higher than Obama, Bush 41, Reagan, and below Bush 43 and Clinton. But Trump is making these strides against the strongest confirmation headwinds any president has ever faced. At this point of their under the previous 5 presidents, for example, only 5.5% of their appointed judges had received even a single vote against confirmation. That figure is 70.8% during the current administration. Think about that for a minute. Let's assume that the 4 nominees this week will be confirmed with the average number of negative votes that the Trump nominees have received this year. Trump's judges will have received on average 18 times the opposition as the judges appointed by his 5 predecessors at this point. And this is why we're seeing the extreme liberal Ninth Circuit now being moderated. We actually have parity in the Ninth Circuit on the left coast. So from SCOTUS on down, this is the biggest threat, and why the Democrats are throwing everything they possibly can at this president to impeach him, because they know that this president's legacy is his court appointees. Because whether he's a 1 or 2-term president, this president's legacy of court appointees, some of them lifetime appointments, are going to go far, far beyond this presidency. So to talk about this and to talk about impeachment and everything that the left are doing, and also with Trump's visit down to Louisiana this week and what that portends for the election coming up next week in Louisiana, I'm really pleased to have Scott McKay. He's the publisher at The Hayride and the writer at The American Spectator. Scott, how are you?
Great to see you, Dave. How are you?
I'm doing really well. So, okay, big news this week. I want to jump right into it with you. The so-called whistleblower, we talked about this over the past couple of days, is a CIA operative identified by Real Clear Investigations as Eric Ciaramella. And he not only worked with former Vice President Joe Biden, but also interacted with the key Democrat operatives for bringing the Ukraine into the 2016 election and crafting the false Russia collusion conspiracy theory. Just want to show you a quick tweet here. Actually, we have Mark S. Zaid. He is the attorney representing the so-called whistleblower in the impeachment inquiry against President Donald Trump. He tweeted in 2017 that the coup has started, adding that impeachment will follow ultimately. Trump actually talked about this last night in Monroe, Louisiana, where he read the tweets. Here's a quick clip.
Impeachment witch hunt. Now we go again. Except a lot of things have happened because, you know, I don't know if you saw, I just got off. I'm coming off the plane and they hand me, look at this character. Okay, they just hand me this story. Coup has started, whistleblower's attorney said in 2017. You know when that was? That was a long time ago. It's all a hoax. They say January 2017, a coup has started, and the impeachment will follow, ultimately. It's all a hoax. It's a scam. And you know who helps them? These people right back here, the media. And then it said, oops, the light's going to go off. The CNN light is going to go off. It said.
So, Scott, he continues to read the tweets. But let me just ask you this. We are talking about deep state here, and this is now all coming out. And, of course, the media doesn't report this. But what are we looking at right now as far as Trump fighting this back and what it means for the 2020 election?
Well, there's a whole bunch of moving parts to this that I think if you pay attention, you can kind of see what's coming. I mean, one of the things is, how many people do we have? Like 6, still 6 candidates on the Democrat side for president who are members of the Senate. And if you end up with an impeachment trial, they're not going to be able to campaign, right? I mean, they're going to be stuck in the Senate dealing with the impeachment trial. So, I don't know how long they expect this thing to last, but what are we, 90, 80 days away from the Iowa caucuses? So unless they somehow figure that, Pete Buttigieg or Joe Biden or somebody is going to be their nominee, their field is going to be taken off the campaign trail based on this. The other thing is that the impeachment trial is a waste of time because they're never going to get to a 2/3 vote in a Republican-dominated Senate. I mean, there are some Republicans, Mitt Romney, his name has been thrown around, who might consider an impeachment, but the vast majority of them don't. I think they need 20 votes to be able to pull that off, and I don't see how that's going to happen. So it's really a waste of time. And then the other piece to this is, I mean, what is the fundamental problem with their impeachment thing? It's that Trump wants to get something investigated that essentially amounts to corruption on Joe Biden's part. I don't know if you have the clip, but one of the funniest things that Trump said in Monroe last night was talking about Hunter Biden getting this job on the board at Burisma Holdings out of the Ukraine. And he looks at this guy or this woman in the front row of the audience, and he says, "Your son, how old is your boy?" You know, and oh, he's 8. He says, "8? Your boy knows more about energy than Hunter Biden does." You know, which was like a really funny moment, but it's the truth, right? Like Hunter Biden got this job making $50,000 a month, you know, on a board of a company that he has no expertise whatsoever in. And you can't get a normal American citizen to look at that as anything other than corruption. And so if what this thing is fundamentally about is Trump trying to get the Ukrainians to assist in an investigation of corruption involving Joe and Hunter Biden, and the Democrats want to impeach him for it, that doesn't bode well for public opinion if you really get this thing started and out in the open and people start understanding what it's about. It's a disaster, which is why you have lots of political, you know, pros and insiders looking at this.
Yep.
You know, even on the Democrat side, saying this is a mess. I mean, you cannot keep going forward with this.
So let's get more into this after this break here, because I really want to get your perspective on this whole, you know, the shenanigans that are taking place across the board here, and we're going to get deep into the weeds on all of this. And no better person than to talk about it all is Scott McKay, publisher at the Hayride and writer at the American Spectator. We'll be right back here at Whiskey Politics. Don't go away. And welcome back to Whiskey Politics. Dave Sussman here, and great to have you with us, and also great to be talking with Scott McKay. We're talking about politics right now, what's going on with this impeachment inquiry, and why so many people are so angry right now, because a lot of people believe that they're creating their own rules right now, where they're basically saying that Democrats could subpoena and question anybody. Republicans, they could subpoena people, but it has to be approved by the Democrats. Scott, what are we seeing on the left right now regarding this impeachment inquiry and the way that they're trying to steer this, where there's literally no due process on, for the president?
Well, it definitely has a little bit of a French Revolution feel to it. You know, I mean, if you remember a few months back when they first started talking about impeachment, one of the things Nancy Pelosi said was that she wouldn't do this unless there were Republicans willing to go along, right? And then they had their impeachment procedures vote, and there wasn't a single Republican that came across the line on that. In fact, they bled 2 Democrats out, so the Republicans were able to talk about how the vote was bipartisan, but it was bipartisan on their side, which, you know, that should have been a signal that this thing was not going to go well. But they're, you know, I think Pelosi and the leadership is being led by the hard left within their caucus. And those are people that, generally speaking, do not have a history of winning national elections. So I think what this thing is it's a train heading down tracks that are, you know, it's fixing to derail. And it's a matter of time before that actually happens. And I think it's going to start to happen probably early next year, maybe in the spring. At a time when, you know, if it gets to the Senate, which it may not, you know, you're going to have a bunch of Democrat senators who are going to be like, hey, I can't do this. I'm trying to run for president. So I don't know when they're going to give this up, but the rulemaking piece to this is not well thought out. And I think there's no real leadership to this. I think the leadership is being dragged along because they've been threatened and cajoled by the hard left and don't really know how to talk those people down.
Do you think Nancy Pelosi, and I've said this throughout all of my shows here, I think she's a pretty tactful and agile politician. You don't become Speaker of the House twice in a lifetime without some semblance of intelligence. But do you think she really messed up with this and calling for the impeachment inquiry?
Well, I think her hand got forced. I mean, and the tip off to me for that was, if you remember, I guess this is a couple of months back when she ended up in that sort of public tiff with AOC. And then all of a sudden that kind of went away, like very quietly, and no, we're fine now. But for 2 or 3 days, it got really, really testy. And then the next
Yeah.
thing you know, there was this impeachment business. And my guess is this had a lot to do with Pelosi recognizing that she had sort of a weak, it's not that she's not a good politician, it's that she's got essentially a caucus full of nuts and she's trying to keep them in line. And this is like what they wanted, and she had to give it to them. I think she knows this is a bad idea, but I think that she feels like she can't hold on to her caucus unless she goes along with it, which puts her in a really, really rough position.
It's going to be really interesting to see what the pushback is going to be against Nancy Pelosi. In fact, your senator at the Monroe rally for Trump, Louisiana Senator John Kennedy, he added to Trump's complaints, which was just going on. He was insulting on both the Democrats, and he took it to John Kennedy took it to the House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Here's a quick clip.
In 3 short years, President Trump has doubled the growth in the greatest economy in all of human history. And you know what our Democratic friends have done for him? Speaker Nancy Pelosi is trying to impeach him. I don't mean any disrespect, but it must suck to be that dumb.
You gotta love John Kennedy.
That's my senator.
He's your senator. But first of all, before we get to the actual point of what he was saying, we're starting to see this fight back now from our elected officials. They're taking a page from Trump, aren't we? We're seeing it with Matt Gaetz and Jim Jordan and all these representatives. This is a fight that I think a lot of conservatives have really been wishing that a lot of their leaders, elected officials would do, been doing for years. And we're now starting to see that.
Yeah, well, the Republican establishment has always prided itself on, being the better behaved of the two political establishments. And I think a lot of people, and I'd count myself as one of them, have just kind of, especially after Mitt Romney lost, it kind of came to the conclusion, you know what, that stuff just doesn't work anymore. I mean, we have way too sort of vicious a culture to be able to energize people and to win arguments without at least having a little volume and heat to what you say. Just a quick primer, though. Anytime John Kennedy starts off a sentence with, "I don't mean any disrespect," there's a haymaker coming, because that's like
Yeah.
one of his favorite things to get started. Once he says, "I don't mean any disrespect," it means that this is going to get really ugly really fast. And I think he's one of the guys that's kind of learned pretty well to maximize this sort of new political culture. But he's not alone. I mean, Lindsey Graham used to be one of the nice guys, and Lindsey Graham is, who I always thought was one of the weak ones. Lindsey Graham has gotten good at it too. And so I think there is a burgeoning conservative culture that just doesn't put up with this stuff anymore. And it's I don't think it's a bad thing. I mean, it's you're keeping up with the times, really.
No, I think it's necessary, because you don't bring a knife to a gunfight, and the Democrats are certainly bringing a lot of guns, although they want to take yours and mine. Let's go back to impeachment here on this, because one of the things that I'm really deeply troubled about is the fact that Adam Schiff is essentially, he's created the Star Chamber. I know it's overused. I want a nickel now for every person who's saying that term, but it is true. And it's hidden away, and they're passing out these transcripts that they are selectively picking and choosing, and they're manipulating a very complicit media for the Democrats. And now you've got 51% of the country that are suggesting, I think we should have an impeachment inquiry. It's interesting that they didn't call the vote a month ago before they started to manipulate the media through these hidden transcripts. Now we're going to public, and we're going to have these open hearings, although they are still not permitting the Republicans to subpoena without Democrats granting them the right to do so. What do you think is going to happen? Is public sentiment going to shift here now that people are going to start to see that there's no there with this quid pro quo, or is it going to go in the Democrats' direction?
Well, I mean, we have a precedent for this, right? Which was the Russia thing. And they spent 2 years largely doing what they've done with Schiff, conducting that thing more or less behind closed doors with the Mueller investigation and leaking things and making the thing look like it was much worse than it actually was. And then when it finally started to turn into a public situation, you found out there was nothing there. There's less here with the Ukraine thing than there was with the Russia thing. Now, what there was with the Russia thing was manifest corruption and abuse on the part of the Obama administration, which I think is at some point going to start playing out in indictments based on what Barr and Durham are doing. But at some point, this thing is going to fall apart because there's nothing to it. I mean, there really is nothing to it. At most, if you really believed that Trump was doing a quid pro quo with the Ukrainians and withholding this military aid based on trying to get an investigation done, at most you could maybe censure a president. I didn't even think that's warranted or would be popular when the public fully knows about this stuff. But I mean, you're going to try to go full bore into impeachment when you can't convict. And this is a problem the Republicans had in 1998 when there was much more manifest misbehavior on the part of Bill Clinton. And I mean, they were doing it basically because they thought it was the right thing to do. I don't think any Democrats really believe this is the right thing to do. They've already given up the ghost. They said, well, if we don't impeach him, he's going to win re-election. I mean, I don't know how you
they did. Al Green
impeach
said that,
and lose and don't pay the
that's
price.
Incredible. And they're doing it. But they have the media. The media are carrying their water. And if you watch any of the mainstream news, you walk away from it thinking this president is bad. He's corrupt as the day is long.
Right.
And I don't think us as a country, and really as I guess people today across the world are all the same. We have our short attention span theater going on. They're not doing enough research on the entire story to hear the other side. That's my biggest worry. Scott, in our last minute here, is this going to turn? You said that we're going to be going to the Senate. You're going to have public hearings, and it could go through to the spring. How does that impact 2020, do you think?
Well, I think once this thing gets on C-SPAN and there is video that's public that can get clipped out and shared all over social media and, be in the blogosphere and all these other places, I think that's when the holes start appearing in this thing. And I think it turns into something. You mentioned the media. If we had more time, we could talk about what happened with James O'Keefe and Project Veritas, showing that ABC News has spiked their story on the Epstein deal. I think that does more to destroy the credibility of mainstream media in America than anything involving the impeachment. But I think the two are related because people are not going to listen to the media as much in the future, now knowing how bad it is with things like Epstein.
Yeah. Scott McKay, find him at The Hayride. It's a great site, and he's the publisher over there and writer at American Spectator. Thank you so much for taking the time. Wish you a great weekend, and go LSU Tigers. That should be a lot of fun. And folks, don't go away, because when we come back, we're going to have John Sullivan, who is the writer and producer of No Safe Spaces. What is going on our college campuses? It is the new film with Adam Carolla and Dennis Prager. So, folks, stick around, because this is going to be really interesting. We're going to talk with the guy who created the film right after the break here at Whiskey Politics. And don't forget, follow us on Facebook at Whiskey Politics Blog, and you can follow me on Twitter at David Sussman. We'll be right back after the break. Welcome back to Whiskey Politics. Dave Sussman here, your host and purveyor at Whiskey Politics. And you can also find me daily at America's Voice live on America's Voice News from 9 to 1 p.m. Every single day we talk in news and commentary, and it is great to be here with you. I'm excited. I get to see a film next Monday. I did see an earlier version of it, but it is one of those films that I know that everybody is focused on right now, because it is taking the zeitgeist of what we're dealing with right now, and that is the essentially the suppression of our free speech, not just on campus, but now through culture. And I'm delighted to have the producer and director of this film, which is called No Safe Spaces, John Sullivan. Welcome, sir. How are you?
I'm doing well, Dave. Thanks for having us on.
It's great to have you. And this is a film with Adam Carolla and Dennis Prager. We're talking about the suppression of free speech here. This is a film that you've been working on for quite a while. Tell us a little bit about the genesis of the film and how long it's taken to actually get out to the theaters.
Yeah, the film started because Adam and Dennis were actually disinvited from speaking at Tucson, Cal State Northridge here in California. And they'd spoken there before, but they suddenly were disinvited from going there. And that kind of led to this journey, which has taken us a couple of years to go through. And part of it's because it's expanded. You know, Dennis has had issues with PragerU and YouTube. We've seen how big tech has moved in on social media sites and started smoking free speech, and banning people from that. And also we're just starting to see this percolate throughout the culture, and it's very, very concerning. People should be absolutely alarmed about it. We've never been in a place where our free speech has been more threatened. 60% of millennials right now thinking the First Amendment should be rewritten, not to cover what they call hate speech. Now, what is hate speech? Who gets to define that? These are very big questions. And the movie, from my perspective, is great because we have both right and left in it. As I tell people, it's not a right or left issue, it's a right or wrong issue.
Right.
And, we have Van Jones in the movie, Alan Dershowitz, Cornel West, Jordan Peterson, Dave Rubin. So, and Adam and Dennis go on this journey. They're a very unlikely odd couple, but at the end, they make it work because they understand the Constitution.
Yeah. I've seen both of them live together about 6 or 7 years ago at a college, and they're fantastic together. It really is salt and pepper, I should say. But let's take a quick look at the trailer for No Safe Spaces.
You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say will be used against you.
You are not listening. I want your job to be taken from you.
A protest has turned violent in California, Berkeley.
This is why we're fighting for the soul of America.
You should be able to share ideas without fear of being fired from your job or shouted down.
You are not to be heard. This is one of the few things one could say we have no precedent for in the United States.
You have the right to remain silent.
The only way we separate the good ideas from the bad ideas is to be free to say whatever we want about them.
Anything you say will be used against you.
There's no free speech for fascists.
Your posts on Facebook, Twitter, and social media will be saved to shame you.
Kevin Hart has stepped down from hosting this year's Oscars.
Anything you say that we don't like will be used to shut you up. You can't be funny.
It's creating an atmosphere of fear and repression, and it's gonna bust.
You cannot think differently.
It makes it difficult for you to learn from other people.
Isn't it spooky that we're having this discussion?
You can't challenge us.
Kids grew up dipped in Purell, playing soccer games where they never kept score.
There is no debate.
The type of diversity that they hate is diversity of thought.
We reserve the right to be offended by everything.
No university should ever create a safe space. You're not going to protect people, and so the best you can do is to make them strong.
It bothers me for the young people who are being deprived of anything that could open their minds.
You have the right to remain silent.
John, incredible. I mean, it's chilling when you see it. Let me ask you, we're roughly the same age. I was in college in the 1980s, and we didn't have this crackdown on free speech. Yeah, there's certain things that you shouldn't say. You don't want to offend people. You don't want to look like a bully. But where did this come from? Where in our culture did this change to the point where we're literally bubble wrapping our kids and we're not allowing them to ever be offended?
Yeah, it's a great question because this is new. This is not something that, like you said, we didn't have this in the 80s and the 90s. In fact, it was something you wore with pride. It was very punk rock to go up against the powers that be. Now there's this conformity, that's going around, and college kids specifically saying, we don't want to hear ideas we don't like. And it's kind of like, well, as Ben Shapiro will say, is facts don't care about your feelings. And, this is the first time. The scary thing is this is being imposed by the students. This is being brought upon by the students. Alan Dershowitz talked about a time in the movie where, in the 60s, administrations were cracking down, and we had the free speech movement at Berkeley moving across, and that was by some administration cracking down on them. But now we have students saying, I don't want to hear this. This is hurting my feelings. This is scaring me. I feel threatened. And we're talking about stuff like mathematics and physics, and these are being labeled racist and other things. So it's gotten to a point of just being absolutely ridiculous. But what people have to remember is these kids don't stay on college campuses. They move on. They become executives of Twitter and Google and Facebook. They start becoming HR department heads and things like this. So it proliferates, and this is going out into our culture. And so it's a very, very scary movement that's accelerated, I think, faster than anybody thought it could. But going back to where the genesis is, I honestly think it starts with parents. I think a lot of parents post 9/11 wanted to keep their kids safe, which is a great thought. But it moved past that to where they wanted to keep them safe from everything. And Jordan Peterson has a great line in the movie where he says, look, there's two ways to go about this. You can make people safe, which you can't really do, or you can make them strong. And I think the earlier generations were more interested in being strong than being safe.
It's interesting because, Generation X, before us were the baby boomers. Then I guess you had the millennials, and now you got the Gen Zs. I'm starting to read a lot of reports that are saying that Gen Zs are really kind of, there's a backlash from Gen Zs over this. They don't like the safe space. They don't like being mollycoddled, and they don't like socialism. Are you hearing anything about that as well?
Yeah, that's the interesting trend you picked up. The USA Today had a poll about this, particularly on sexuality, and they were basically saying that, Gen Z is more intolerant, going back almost to like Gen X or even Boomers on certain sexuality, given the fact, I think it's just shoved down their throat all the time. So they're kind of like, they're a far more pragmatic generation, is what we're seeing them and finding them. So they're kind of like, look, we don't believe in any political system. We're not right, we're not left. We just want to see what works. And you know what? Quit trying to shove this down our throats. I think for our generation, Gen X, we were advertised to in such a way that we got tired of it. Now, for these guys, they're being administrated to in such a way from the very early ages. And I do think pendulum swing. Dennis has talked, Adam's talked a lot about this, and that pendulum swing, and you might be seeing that pendulum swinging back. After Carter, you had the Reagan Revolution. So we'll see. I mean, I'm actually more optimistic about Gen Z. I think the millennials are lost, but I think Gen Z, there might be some hope.
Well, it goes back to what you were just saying regarding the kids don't stay in college forever, and you've got the millennials that are now moving up in corporations, and you see things like Nike take a knee, and you see things like Gillette and, toxic masculinity, and, we're seeing it in our movies. I mean, the entire Star Wars franchise has been taken over by the left. The feminists and everything else. And so let me ask you real quickly in our last couple of minutes before our first break here, how much is social media responsible for this, where the outrage of the day is just blown up like an atom bomb, where before, water off a duck's back in most cases, sticks and stones may hurt my bones. But today, we're seeing people that are able to sit around and commiserate with each other, and they blow things up into something that is probably a lot more than it should be.
No, I think social media contributes a lot to it, right? Because before you would have had to get people in your local town, and you'd have to get you might have had a dozen people or something show up to some meeting, or if you didn't like something. Well, now you're connected to a community, and you're going to have like-minded people around you that you can kind of glob onto, and you can have, a relatively few people make a very big impact on it. I used to work in market research, and you see this all the time, where you wouldn't have real trends on something, but you'd have very loud groups talking about something, and advertisers would make a move on that, and it would be the wrong move because you had a very squeaky, loud group, but they did not represent the masses. So I think social media does that. It amplifies that and gives you an asymmetrical look at the world when that happens.
Yeah. Before we go to our first break here with you, tell us where folks can find No Safe Spaces at their theaters. How to find it.
Yeah, if you go to nosafespaces.com, you can find where theaters are playing locally near you. We're going to be expanding week by week. We opened in Phoenix a couple weeks ago to a tremendous opening. We're in San Diego, in Denver, currently along with Phoenix. We're opening Tampa and Greenville, South Carolina this week. But go to nosafespaces.com and you can find a theater near you.
Fantastic. And like I said, I saw an earlier screening. I'm going to see the updated one in a few days here. I'm really excited to see it myself again. And folks, you should all check out this film. And we're going to talk about films. We're going to talk about conservative films, or we're going to talk about films that focus on culture after the break, because John Sullivan, this isn't your only film. You've been involved with many other films as well. We're going to talk about how Rotten Tomatoes takes a look at films like this too, and what President Trump is doing, weighing in on free speech. Right after the break, Dave Sussman here at Whiskey Politics. Don't go away. And welcome back to Whiskey Politics. Great to be here with you on a Thursday. And you can find us Thursdays at 4 p.m. at America's Voice News. And also, don't forget to follow me at America's Voice Live from 11 to 1 each day, weekday that is 2 to 4 East Coast time. And follow us on our Whiskey Politics Facebook page. Got a lot of action on there. We put a lot of fun stuff, as well as videos like this as well. We got John Sullivan, who is the writer and the producer of a great new film that everybody should see. I'm going to try and get my kids to see it as well, or at least my youngest. My oldest is at college now, probably fighting off the free speech, assault on free speech at different campuses that we're seeing across the country. And I'm just going to say this. President Trump is also very much aware of the assault on free speech, and he signed an executive order requiring that U.S. colleges seeking federal research funding must certify that their policies support free speech in order to receive it. Here's a quick clip.
With a stroke of the pen, President Trump issued an ultimatum to U.S. colleges.
Universities that want taxpayer dollars should promote free speech, not silence free speech.
The executive order signed today requires colleges to certify that their policies support free speech as a condition.
Oh, the clip ended there prematurely. But, John, we got the point here. Donald Trump is very much aware of the threat to free speech on our college campuses. I mean, for you guys who produced the movie, everybody involved with No Safe Spaces, that must have been very fulfilling for you. It felt like you're getting something done here.
Yeah, in one sense it is. At the same time, it's a little scary that we have to have government intervention like that. I mean, as a libertarian, I don't want the government kind of doing anything. This is protected in our Constitution, and the fact that the government, the president has to intervene again like this to do something, it just shows once again how far we've slipped away on this, on an issue that, the right and left used to agree upon constantly. And I think some of them still do. I mean, Barack Obama, President Obama even, just recently came out singing for free speech, in a big way. So to see that Trump and Obama are sitting on the same side is something that's unique to me. But yeah, we're definitely seeing it. And the fact is, unfortunately, we have to have the president weigh in at this time and, make an executive order like that because it's gotten so bad on these things.
That's how bad it's gotten, that you have to have an executive order. And that is truly scary. I have to ask myself when I take a look at things like this, sometimes we're so ingrained, we're so involved in our own echo chamber, in our own media, that sometimes I wonder whether it is really that bad on campus. But how pervasive is this right now? Are we seeing this across the board? Is it just in the United States? Are we seeing it in Canada, throughout Europe? What's the lay of the land right now with the threat to free speech?
Well, Canada is even worse. So right now in Canada, if you do not use the proper pronoun for somebody that they ascribe to, which is one of 72, I think, approved, you could face jail time. And this is what Jordan Peterson was reacting against, in saying, like, I'm not going to use the language. In fact, I think he quote him in the movie, he says, there's no way in hell I'm going to use So again, we're moving to a place where it's prescribed speech. And this is very, very scary. This is super dangerous to say, what you can and can't say. We're seeing in China that they're issuing social media credits. This affects your job, your credit score, other things like that. The United States, for the most part, was still free, but we were seeing this in focus on it, to where people are, again, promoting pronoun usage or facing fines and things like that. So we're seeing it creep in here, and we've got to fight it back. Because if we lose this, you're not going to be able to say anything about it. That's the key thing to remember. You're not going to be able to fight back after this is gone. It'll be gone once it's gone.
John, let's talk about movies, specifically conservative-leaning or more cultural movies. This isn't your only movie. You've been involved in several movies. I've seen many premieres. And you just give us a quick rundown of some of the other movies that you've been involved with real quick, because there are too many for me to remember here.
Yeah, so I co-wrote and directed 2016 Obama's America with Domestic Visa. I did the follow-up, America, Imagine the World Without Her. I was a producer on Dog No last year, and also Unplanned most recently. So yeah, not my first rodeo.
Yeah.
Been in the business for a while, but done about $100 million in box office. So excited about that.
Yeah, it's incredible. And the business, and I've seen all of those films. Some of them have been seen at premieres with you. The audience reactions are always overwhelmingly positive. But maybe preaching to the converted, I don't know. But I want to ask you about the way that movie critics today are essentially responding to right of center, more cultural leaning movies. We take a look at a film like Gosnell or Unplanned or Hillary's America. They come right out and basically hate it. But if we take a look right now at the Rotten Tomatoes score, which is what everybody seems to be using these days to gauge whether they want to go see a film, we see that 44% of the critics liked it. Now, those are the critics. The 100% is for the people. And people that don't know the Rotten Tomatoes score, you've got these critics that are essentially more reliable as far as, because that's kind of their career. They go see these films. But is it that critics today are just, most of them, 99% of them, are left of center, and anything coming out which in any way raises the question or a specter of the left is bad, free speech, assault and this and that, they're immediately going to come in with their disposition of not liking it before they even see it?
Oh, 100%. Not 44%, but 100%. Yeah, it's the critics, and I don't really pay that much attention to the critical reviews anymore, and I always laugh at these situations. We've been down in the teens, but with like a 98% audience rating. Both Unplanned and America got what's called A+ cinema scores, which is where the audience ranks it, and those were A+. We're seeing probably 3 to 5 movies a year get that. So that tells us that the audience loves the movies, and there is an audience to this. Now, with the critics, when I've read some of the critical reviews of things, and most recently even with No Safe Spaces, they're not arguing facts of the movie. They're just arguing what they like or don't like. It's just absolute opinion. There's no fact in there they can refute that these events happened or didn't happen, or this is the movement, what's going on. It was even worse in 2016. They basically, I remember we had a thing called fact checking the fact checkers, where AP put an article out, and it was just an opinion piece, kind of masquerade as a fact check. 100% of the facts we were correct on, and they were wrong, and they were just, actually had to offer a retraction on it. So again, with the critics, they're mostly millennials these days. And there's been a proliferation of them, given blogs and everything else. They're kind of more tuned into the Marvel movies and those kinds of things. There's something that they think is avant-garde, which I think died in the 60s, at least in the 80s, I feel. So from that standpoint, I don't know. I don't feel like critics really offer what they used to.
Yeah. If you're left of center and you're watching this show right now, talk to those people. Why should they come see this movie?
Well, I think you need to understand that this is not a right or left issue. We have lots of people on the left in this film that are defending free speech.
You have the
Dave Rubin, I think, is one of the most poignant ones in the movie about this. Who, Dave is he's gay, he's married, he's been a lifelong Democrat, but he is an absolute defender of free speech. He's the type of guy I look at and I say there is a middle ground there to be had from the left even. But they need to understand they're coming for you. We saw this with Brett Weinstein, who was on the left and then was run out of Evergreen College, who was documenting the film. We've seen it with Lindsay Shepard, who is left of center, run off of campus, who was a teaching aide who played a Jordan Peterson video. They will, as Dave says in the movie, they will come for you. So you have to understand that if you're not willing to stand up for this now, it will be gone. And, I'm seeing a lot of people on the right and the left come together on this issue, which to me is very exciting to see that happening, considering how divisive politics have been.
Maybe this is the thing that brings us together as a country, because we're certainly unified on other issues as well. But free speech, that's our First Amendment. It's the number one amendment for a reason. Backed up by the Second Amendment, by the way. But, this is something that we obviously all need to sit down and have a discussion over, because this is not a good trajectory for a country that has been built on freedom, economic freedom and freedom of speech all combined. And so, John, I wish you the best of luck. I hope the movie makes a ton and it gets legs and gets out there. And folks, if you're watching this, please bring a friend and watch this movie as well. I'm going to see it firsthand myself Monday night. And it should be in a theater near you. So where is it? NoSafeSpaces.com, John?
Yeah, NoSafeSpaces.com. You can find the theater where it's playing now, and we'll be rolling more theaters out over the next couple of weeks.
Outstanding. And appreciate everything that you do. Andrew Breitbart said, politics is downstream from culture. It all starts with things that you are doing right now. So appreciate you taking the time, John. Best of luck, and I'll see you on Monday. And folks, thank you for joining us here at Whiskey Politics. Find our Facebook page at Whiskey Politics. Give us a like, and you can enjoy all the fun content. And we'll be back next Thursday. I'm Dave Sussman signing off. Cheers.